Hi, everyone, and welcome to Woman Enough for Marriage. My name is Wumi Ajayi. This is a channel where we talk everything marriage, and this is in recognition of the fact that making a success of marriage, it's not about being woman enough, it's not about being man enough. It takes working at it, it takes the grace of God, it takes learning and unlearning, it takes both the husband and the wife making up their minds to work at their marriage. I started a series on forgiveness in my last video, and I'm going to continue today. So today is forgiveness part 2. And today I want to address the offended, because when we're talking about forgiveness, we're talking about someone who has offended, who has caused the hurt, and the one who has been offended, which can be referred to as the victim of the offense. Now, when we talk about forgiveness, forgiveness is both an event and a process. Giving forgiveness to an offender is an event. So sometimes, we can say the words, I forgive you, or we accept somebody's apology. But actually, simply saying, I forgive you or I accept your apology is not forgiveness, because forgiveness can occur without even speaking to the wrongdoer. And like I said in the last video, sometimes we have to forgive people, not necessarily because they have given us an apology, or not necessarily because they have accepted that they wronged us. So forgiveness is not just as simple as saying, I forgive you. Finding relief from the pain and all the negative emotions and feelings that comes with the hurt is actually a process. And that's a process that the one that has been offended must be willing to go through for them to actually forgive truly. Forgiveness involves an emotional change that occurs within the person who has been wronged. So it takes time. Anything that is, that's emotional, it takes time for it to heal. And that's why it's important that, when we're talking about forgiveness, we recognize that it is a process and it takes time for the person that has been offended to heal. Like I said in the first video, I am not a psychologist. If somebody feels strongly about forgiveness, if it's affected them, seriously, it's affected their relationship, my suggestion is that you seek counseling, seek help from a professional, counselor or someone that's in a position to help you. The first step in forgiveness is being honest with our pain. It's not enough to just discard or minimize the fact that you are hurt. That is not forgiveness. We need to acknowledge the pain and the hurt that we feel. Sometimes we just use, bold face, and we try to cover things and minimize the effect of a hurt. If somebody has done something that offends you, if your spouse has hurt you, acknowledge it, be honest with it. What is the offense? What did they do? How did I feel offended? What actually happened? What are the painful emotions that I'm experiencing as a result? Am I angry? Is it anger? Is it resentment? Do I feel unfairly treated? Is it frustration? Sometimes it could be shame, depending on what the offense is. We need to be honest with how the offense, the hurt has affected us, how it's changed my behavior, maybe because of what my spouse has done. I'm now avoiding them, we're trying to avoid each other, or I now distrust them, or I lack faith in them, or faith in our relationship. As of this relationship, I'm not sure it's going to work. How, have I lost respect for them because of what they have done? It's important that we're honest with these things. Sometimes there are practical costs to offense as well. Sometimes because you've been offended, you spend so much time thinking about it. Sometimes you will lose concentrations. Some people might, commit errors and mistakes at work because they can't concentrate at work. The offense, the hurt is consuming them. Inability to give kids attention, or maybe you are just unnecessarily frustrated at the kids because you're hurt and offended. Sometimes physical harms can be caused as a result of of offense. So, injuries from abuse, emotional, physical injuries. It's important that we're honest with them. We should also be honest about what actually is hurting us. Is it the action of the person or the person? And I think this becomes very, very important in a love relationship, in our marriages. We should be able to separate the hurt, the action, from the person. Easier said than done, but sometimes that's what we need to do. Is it him that is annoying me, or is it his action? Is it her that is making me angry, or is it her action that is making me angry? And sometimes it might help to talk about these things rather than, letting things go round and round in our heads. It's important that if we find someone that is impartial and trusted, note the emphasis, someone that is impartial and someone that we can trust. For example, our marriage mentors. It's important that we are able to talk about these things, talk it through with them. Our family and friends, sometimes their natural instinct is to protect us from hurt. So when we go to them with our matters, when we go to them with how our spouses have offended us, they might not be, best placed to help us. And sometimes it might even magnify the issue and make it, blow it out of proportion. So if we're going to talk to somebody, with all honesty, to express our pain and the hurt that we feel about an offense, that we choose who we speak to carefully. The second step is to think rationally about the hurt. We are emotional beings, and sometimes, our emotions cloud our thinking and our judgment. And sometimes it can lead to what is called cognitive rehearsal, where we have recurring thoughts about the offense and hurt. And if we don't deal with recurring thoughts and cognitive rehearsal, it can lead us or our relationship on a downward spiral. And sometimes we find a small offense being blown out of proportion. So we need to get to the point where we've been able to set our emotions aside and think rationally about the hurt. What actually caused me the hurt? And all this anger and unforgiveness, is it actually, is it worth it? The offense, is it intentional? Is it unintentional? Is it characteristical of the person, or is it out of character for them? It's important that we consider all possible arguments. What might have impacted their action? So if my husband spoke to me in the way that I didn't like and I'm offended by that, I should be able to think rationally about, okay, what might have impacted him? If it's unlike him, what's going on with him at that point in time? Is it work stress? Is it financial stress? Is it hunger? Because something as small as tiredness and hunger can cause offense. Is it something that I've said that has triggered something from their past? It's important that we consider all these arguments, not necessarily because we are trying to make excuses for them, but sometimes when we consider all these arguments, it might help us to deal with the issue better, and it might help us with the process of forgiveness. Self examination is also important, and this is different from victim blame. This is different from condoning what they've done. This is different from, excusing them, because there is no excuse that we can make for, everybody has to take responsibility for their actions. But it's an acknowledgement that, as the person that is offended, even though I am offended, I can also learn from the event by looking inward to say, what role did I play? Could I have spoken to them or acted differently? Would it not have led to them causing the offense? For example, the Bible says a gentle answer turns away wrath. So sometimes when we look inward, we learn more about ourselves and we're able to see the role that we've played as well. But oftentimes, our feelings of emotions and offense blinds us from being able to look inwards to see what we too could have done better. It might also help if we have someone that we can talk these things through with. Again, it has to be an impartial and trusted person. Step three is to actually decide or make up our minds to move forward. When somebody hurts us, we need to accept that we can't go back in time to change what has happened. It has happened. And if we don't decide to move forward, then we will stay stuck in the past. Because even when it happened yesterday, 2 minutes ago, it's already in the past. A decision to move forward acknowledges that what has happened in the past is now affecting the present. We need to be honest about how unforgiveness or not dealing with the offense or not dealing with the situation is affecting us. How is it affecting our peace, our joy in marriage, the home, the children? We need to be honest with ourselves. And if we are not, then we will continue to pay the price. Other people around us will continue to pay the price because we have not decided to move forward from the offense. It's not until when we decide that enough is enough. We are tired. I'm tired of languishing in the pain of the past. And that's when we're ready to move forward. And that's when we're ready to forgive. And that is what will help us in the next step, which is our decision to forgive. Now, like I said in the first video, forgiveness is showing mercy, it's showing grace, it's showing kindness and leniency to the offender that, they might not deserve. And one of the reasons that we struggle with the decision to forgive is because of the deceptive feeling of control that we experience as long as we have not forgiven. We refuse to forgive because that provides, it gives us a feeling of power over the person that has offended us. But this feeling is actually it's a deceptive control feeling. It's really what it actually is a cover for our own sense of hurt and vulnerability. We don't want to show that we're vulnerable. We don't want to, so we feel that we are in control by choosing not to forgive. We can also feel justified to be angry, and so we want to hold on to our right to be angry for as long as possible. But deciding to forgive means that we let go of our right to anger and resentment because it's only then that we can heal. Deciding to forgive is also refusing to be a victim or refusing to remain a victim. So it's important that we get to the point where we're able to make that decision. Revenge might feel good for a time because sometimes that's what we think, the only thing that we think might be able to, pacify our anger and feelings of resentment. But actually, yes, it might feel good for a time. Ultimately, it does not help us to heal. And when we're talking about forgiveness, like I said again in the first video, forgiveness is more to set ourselves free. It's not necessary for the offender because the offender might have, could have died. The offender could have, you might not see them again and things like that. So even when we can't see the offender, we need to forgive to set ourselves free. We must remember that the pain that we give when it comes to not forgiving or when it comes to taking revenge can never cancel the pain that we've received. There's no point in unforgiveness, there's no point in revenge because you've already been hurt. So trying to hurt the other person or trying to cause them pain is never ever going to cancel the pain that you are experiencing or the pain that you have experienced. One thing that might help us in that, in making the decision to forgive is to try and, we can try and list the pros and cons of deciding to forgive. Okay, if I forgive them, what are the pros and cons? If I choose not to forgive them, what are the pros and cons? And we're likely to see that the benefits, the pros of forgiving outweighs any perceived cons that, or any perceived benefit that we think might be in unforgiveness. The next step is the step of restoration because once we forgive, it's important to take steps to repair the relationship. It's time to make amends. It's time to repair the broken bridges. It's time to leave the past, to both the sides, to leave the past where it should be and focus on a new beginning, focus on the present, and focus on the future. It's important that we concentrate on restoring our communication, love and kindness, empathy, compassion, intimacy in our relationship, physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, sexual intimacy, all forms of intimacy that might have been affected. Because when there is an offense, oftentimes what that does is it creates a barrier, it breaks our intimacy, it creates a gap in our relationship. So it's important that we concentrate on rebuilding all those things, all those areas of our relationship that has been affected. But I will also say that in certain relationships and even sometimes in marriage, like I said in the first video, Forgiveness does not necessarily mean restoration. It might be necessary in certain situations to take the power away from the offender, to take the power away from the perpetrator, especially in cases of abuse. And restoration in this case might not necessarily mean reconciliation. And in certain cases, actually, it might be necessary to involve professionals, to help us in working out what restoration will look like in our specific or peculiar case. The last step that I want to talk about is the step of reflections. It's important that we are able to reflect on any experiences that we have in terms of offense and hurt and unforgiveness. It's important to reflect and take lessons out of every misunderstanding, every conflict, every hurt that we experience as a couple and use them as a template for growth. Reflection can also help us to mitigate against it happening again. The thing about history is that it has a way of repeating itself in our lives if we do not learn from it first time round. That's why history, especially bad history, if we don't learn from it, then it will repeat itself. So we should have the offended thinking, what can I learn from this situation? And we should also have the offender thinking, how can I learn from this situation? We should not just throw the issue out once it's dealt with. It would help, it would be very helpful in moving forward if we can sit down as individuals and as a couple. We always recommend that for couples to have a time of review, where you sit down and you review your relationship, you talk about the present, you talk about your future. It's important that we're able to, when emotions have settled and the relationship is restored, that as a couple we're able to reflect on what has happened and take out lessons, joint lessons, individual lessons for the future. Things like behavioral changes that we can adapt, mutual agreement and understanding on certain things. Say for example, maybe what caused the misunderstanding or conflict was to do with disciplining children. Maybe you have different views, different styles. It's about things like sitting down and agree on having an understanding. Okay, when it comes to the children, we will be saying the same thing. We will not allow them to play us against each other, things like that. There are mutual agreements and understanding that we can come to by taking time to reflect on situations that caused conflict and misunderstanding between us as couples. Ephesians 4:32 that I read in my first video says, and be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving one another, just as God also forgave you in Christ. Forgiveness is the road to freedom. If we have been forgiven, then we can forgive. It's a choice that we have to make. And our willingness to participate in the process of forgiveness is a reflection of how much we actually appreciate being forgiven by God. So if we appreciate the fact that God forgave us, He let us off. He wiped the slate clean every time we come to Him for forgiveness. Then we should also be ready, willing to forgive each other as husband and wives, and even other people that offend us as well. If we allow ourselves to go through this process of forgiveness, we will realize that with time, all the negative emotions that we were harboring against our spouse or the person that hurt us, they will gradually diminish and then disappear, such that we can remember the event or the incident with freedom, and a sense of achievement of growth, for having dealt with the situation gracefully. I'm going to stop here in part 3, which will be the final part. I'll be talking about the offender. I'll be talking about the dangers of unforgiveness and the benefits of forgiveness. I pray that, if there's anyone that's struggling with unforgiveness or maybe you've been hurt so deeply, I pray that you find the grace and the strength within you to forgive and set yourself free and start the process of healing. Thank you so much for joining me. Like I always say, marriage is meant to be enjoyed, not to be endured. God bless you.